Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Zanzal, coach, ordained minister, grandma, mama of four, and a queer woman married to my lovely, gorgeous wife after I came out later in life. This is Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA Plus Stories, a podcast for everyone exploring identity, queerness, and what it means to live more truthfully, no matter our age or stage. We share stories of coming out, starting over, resiliency, how to navigate relationships, grief, joy, and building lives that actually fit us as human beings. No labels required, just curiosity, courage, and a little faith in this journey. Welcome. Let's dive in. Hi, this is Anne-Marie Zanzal, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA Plus Stories. I am very excited to welcome Dr. Samantha Winterberg to the show today. Dr. Winterberg's background spans several decades of health education across various contexts. She earned a master's in health psychology and her doctorate in education specializing in teaching and learning. She spent almost 2 decades in clinical and private practice as a health psychologist and an outpatient therapist. She also serves as a doctoral mentor and works as a subject matter expert in biopsychosocial approaches to integrative care. Her earlier career was marked by advocacy and treatment for survivors of domestic and sexual violence, drawing inspiration from their resilience in overcoming adverse childhood experiences, psychological stressors, stigma, and inadequate protective policies. To date, she has published over 13 books and workbooks centered on educational equality and inclusivity, particularly for marginalized communities. In her book, Coming Out and Adulthood, she guides readers through some of the most challenging emotions and experiences as they navigate the coming out process. She continues to champion efforts for cultural sensitivity through teaching and remains an ardent advocate for personal sovereignty. Samantha, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm going to cut off Samantha's workbook, Dr. Winterberg's workbook right now, and it is a great workbook. I'll give you the link to where you can get it in the show notes, and we will put it in underneath our YouTube presentation. Love this book. Read it all. It's good. So, Dr. Winterberg, can you share me your story?
Sure. My story is perhaps not as riveting as some. However, it is mine, and I'd be happy to share it. So I am approaching 60 years old. I'm living as a queer person, but I have always felt that I had some type of attraction, nuanced attraction, I would say. But in young childhood, that was certainly not something that was accepted or developed or even discussed, right? We don't have the language, the literature for those type of conversations to be had.
In the era that we grew up in, as we're about the same age.
Absolutely.
It didn't happen.
Didn't happen. And so it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s and I was married to a man at the time, 2 beautiful children. But I had felt that there was a shift in the fluidity of the attractiveness that I had for men and for women. And so I did not explore that in my marriage, but post-divorce, which came around 22 years ago, was the first time that I had my first female relationship. And from that point, I was like, oh, I'm home. Okay. So I knew at that time that it was just really a matter of me moving through stages of development, really understanding myself, coming into myself. I had to do a lot of self-searching. I've been on this, what we call our spiritual journey, for about 30 years now. So that all sort of coincided with me understanding other expressions of myself and understanding that sexuality can be fluid, gender expression can be fluid. So I kind of tapped into the academic side where a lot of my work now has been processed through. But still, I'm still very much involved in just working with people one-on-one, whether it's in my clinical practice or whether it's just being an advocate. Because I think it's important for us to understand who we are. When we know ourselves, it's so much easier for us to have relationships that are healthy, when we're not searching outside, when we feel confident in really who we are as individuals. And that is okay. And, we can talk a lot about like some of the harder emotions, which I talk about in my book. But anyway, that's kind of my story. So now I'm out and I feel fine. I feel comfortable with it. I'm given the current political situation, I have had to shift, or I've wanted to shift, how I express myself in the world for safety purposes. But internally, I'm very much an advocate and a supporter for people who are going through this process. It is not an easy process.
Amen. It is not an easy process. I have a couple of questions for you. In our community, we often talk about a catalyst, and a catalyst can be a human that makes you realize you're not as straight as you thought you were, or it can be a life event. Do you think your divorce was the life event that happened for you, or did you have a catalyst as well? A human catalyst.
Yeah. As I look back, I can see like I had a mad crush on my teacher when I was in elementary school.
Mhm.
And I used to look at her and just be in such awe and wonder. And I didn't identify that as attraction because it just wasn't part of my development at the time. I didn't understand that. But as I look back, I see, wow, oh, wow, it wasn't just that I thought she had a pretty skirt on or whatever. There was like a real attraction. So I did what, any 8 or 9 year old would do. I acted out in class until I made her cry. But I see that those behaviors now were just me really struggling. So I would say like that would be a catalyst of awareness. In terms of life event, no, because I was actually open with my husband and I offered to try to just work through it and not necessarily have it be something where we were going to bring another person in or that I had to explore this necessarily sexually. It wasn't anything like that at the time. So I don't know if that was a life event, but what it did do is in my own level of consciousness and my moral code and whatever rules and regs I live by for my own life, I decided that having a relationship with a woman before I got divorced was not something that I wanted to do. I'm not saying that that is the wrong path to take, but I'm just saying for me personally, I waited and then I had a relationship.
We're very similar in that. A lot of people talk about opening up their relationships. And that is, I find, I put that under the category of bargaining in the grieving process because I feel like people are grieving what they had and they're in this process of letting go of their identity that they had. And part of that identity is being married woman with, in a straight marriage. A lot of times people go to the opening their marriage, and some people call it polyamory, and sometimes it is literally polyamory, but those are two different things. And I find that a lot of people do it and they don't take in the consideration you're inviting one or two whole people into your relationship with their spouse. I find that it's very patriarchal and misogynistic because a lot of times husbands are very okay with their wives having a relationship with a woman. But if they said, oh, can we open up our marriage so I can be with another man? They would never do it. And the polyamory circles, I'm going to swear here, they call it the one dick rule. Yes, we're polyamorous, but I'm the only man you can sleep with. So I have found that opening up relationships can be really problematic. And so my ex-husband and I had that discussion in like a half an hour. And we also realized that we were a long time monogamous couple, and that's hard to go from a monogamous couple to an open relationship. It's just tough. Yeah.
It is challenging, but I think for best effort for women who are really feeling a call to explore their sexuality in a world where women are not typically allowed to ask for what they want.
Yes.
And so, there's a lot of internal resistance. And one way, we could call it a workaround in a heterosexual marriage, is to share with the husband and ask for permission to explore sexual desire. In my field of practice, I work with couples that have opened up their marriage. There are foundational tenets that need to be upheld for it to work. There has to be healthy communication. There's a number of things that have to take place in order for that to work. But I really believe that we're in a monogamous culture. Some of that is forced. The reason, not to get into history and politics of it, but one of the reasons why I think sometimes we get that level of tension in it is because we are indoctrinated to believe that we should be with one person for the rest of our lives. I don't know if that is the best route. I mean, when we lived to be 30 or 40 way back in the day, maybe that was ideal, but now we're living to be 100. Do we really expect that we're going to be happy in our relationship? So there's a lot of room for looking at why that patriarchal dynamic exists and how we can move that into just a space where women can ask for what they need, can feel confident and competent in asking for what they need and not feel guilty or shameful that they want something other than the one dick.
Hi, it's Anna and Pete.
And I'm Anne-Marie Zanzal. We are part of the production team of Secure Lesbian Bonds.
You love each other, but lately it feels like you're speaking different emotional languages. Conversations turn into arguments or silence. You feel alone even when you're right next to her.
But you're not broken. You're just stuck in a painful cycle, and there's a way out. Strengthening Love is an online relationship course created specifically for lesbian couples. It blends emotion-focused therapy, trauma-informed tools, and real-world support to help you reconnect without blame or shame.
Inside, you'll learn how to recognize your emotional triggers, communicate with compassion, and rebuild intimacy that lasts. It's flexible, self-paced, and completely affirming of your relationship.
And for less than 2 therapy sessions, you get lifetime access to a full relationship roadmap with worksheets, partner exercises, and guidance from queer women who get it. Start today at healthylesbianrelationships.com.
Because your love deserves to feel safe, seen, and strong again.
You know, first of all, I'm so glad that you work with couples that are opening up their marriages, because that is.
I do. And I have clients all over the country because I have a holistic practice now. I live in Colorado, but I do work virtually with people all over the country. And in fact, a couple other countries. So that's certainly an opportunity, and I appreciate the referral. But I do think it's important for each person to, before they go ahead and look at polyamory as an answer to a relationship dynamic that just is unhealthy as it is, you're not really probably the best prepared to move forward in that. Because it is something that really requires a strong sense of self and unity prior to opening yourself up to that.
And also incredible communication skills. So how did this workbook come about? It is called Coming Out in Adulthood. How did it come about?
The original version of that I wrote during COVID, when I was spending 3 months in isolation, looking for things to do and ponder. And I thought, let me step into this topic in a way that I could do more than just what I'm doing, which is one-on-one. Because when COVID happened, like, I was an outpatient therapist. When COVID happened, like, we were all looking to go online. Like, I had to kind of reboot my practice. And I thought, well, if I wanted to go to a counselor, and there's a lot of really great counselors out there, and I love allyship, thank you all. But for me personally, if I want to see a counselor about something that I might be struggling with in terms of my sexuality, my gender expression, etc., or a relationship I'm in, I'm going to go to a queer counselor. I'm going to talk to someone who's lived it.
Yes.
Just like I would, if I was having trouble with my children, I would prefer a counselor who had children so they understood. It is not that there's not qualified counselors. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, and I do find that I've had so many people reach out to me over the years, and they're like, I've worked with other people, but they just don't get this. I've had so many women who have been in therapy discover this about themselves, and their straight therapist wants to just put it in a box and doesn't realize how all-consuming it is, especially in the beginning when you're just figuring this all out, because you can't think about anything else. But in the beginning, there's a lot of things you're thinking about. So as somebody who's first coming out and they're coming to your workbook, what kind of questions are they coming to with? Like,
what deficit do I have? What is wrong with me?
mm-hmm.
Why am I broken? Is this related to some childhood trauma that I've had? How can I own the feelings that I'm having, the thoughts that I'm having, the intrusiveness of my desire? How can I own that without the shame? How can I choose to live? Because a lot of women do still choose, men as well, choose to live in their heterosexual relationship. How do I manage myself and stay in a relationship that I still feel is loving? So there's a lot of questions that they ask.
Part of your workbook, I noticed, is that you really delved into fear, and you talked about it for at least a chapter. I find that fear is what keeps people in the closet more than anything else. Can you talk to me a little bit about fear, and how can people work through those feelings? Because I always see them in terms of, like, you want to leave your comfort zone, and the first thing outside of our comfort zone is often fear, because it's trying to keep us safe. How do people start to embrace their fear and to work through it?
Sure. Well, fear, like a lot of the emotions that we would term to be negative emotions, like shame and guilt and regret, remorse, things like that, are really coming from a place of feeling either inadequacy or feeling undeserving.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's coming from a place of unfamiliarity.
Mm-hmm.
your brain, not to get into too much of the neuroscience, but our brain is really doing what it's supposed to do, which it is going to scan the room for danger.
Mhm.
And that could be psychological unsafeness.
Mhm.
That could be change that I might not be prepared for.
Mhm.
That might be emotional dysregulation. In other words, like the person and the people I'm wanting to share this information with are going to explode, think negatively, harm me in some way. So your brain's actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is signaling, hey, look, you're in this space right now, and this feels really uncomfortable to me. So we can label it as fear. Sometimes it's not actually fear. It might be confusion. It might be disconnection, disorientation, familiarity, things like that. Anxiety, kind of anticipated anxiety, like if I do this, this might happen. So there's a lot of things that come into that. So a workaround for any of these emotions would be to really, I think, sit inside a space of what am I actually afraid of? Where's that fear coming from? Why am I afraid that I'm not allowed to change who I am?
Mhm.
Domain, sovereignty, agency to be who I am, do the job I want to do, eat the food I want to eat, wear the clothes I want to wear. Why cannot then I not also express a feeling that I might be having or a desire that I might be having? Why is that taboo? So it's really dissolving the fear by looking at it from where did it come from?
Mhm.
Where did I learn I could not ask to be me? Or where did I learn in childhood usually that I could bend rules, right? That I
Mhm.
could come into a new version of myself. And because that's really all it is. It's just another aspect of self. Like I know that we have these categories that, you're lesbian, you're gay, you're bisexual, etc. But really sexual orientation is fluid throughout the lifespan,
Mhm.
right? I mean, we learn rules.
Did you believe that? Have you believed that your whole career, or is it something that has evolved? Because when I first started doing this work, I was pretty rigid, and now I'm like exactly where you are. Like it's very fluid with a lot of people. So I'm curious, did it change over time? Like, and you've been a practicing psychologist for a long time. Has it evolved as you've
Yeah.
worked with this
So it's
community?
absolutely, yeah, no, great question though. But I've absolutely evolved the way that I approach certain things only because I've done so much academic research. So I've actually published a lot of different books, a lot on the subject of LGBTQ plus equity in education, but also socially, culturally, the history of and where we could go and what is stifling freedom of expression,
Mhm.
gender and sexual expression. So, and then I also teach other physicians how to, look at the sensitivity around patient care, what is appropriate, how to address issues, et cetera, et cetera. So like there's been all of this like academic layering, which has shifted my opinion.
Mhm.
I would say just as a psychologist, when we understand human behavior, we know that it often is these default programs that happen in early childhood, generally before the age of 7, that how we're going to view life, like the lens that we view the world through is actually 95% of it has been already captured in the first years of life. That is what we have to move through. And there's like this place of like, how can I re-empower myself to shed a lot of the old tapes, the things that keep me stuck, how I get constrained so that I can feel free. That freedom of expression is everything because autonomy means everything,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, so because I'm a psychologist, through my training, through my academic studies, through my research, through my experience working with people, I fully, I think, understand. I'm also always looking for more things to learn, so I don't know it all for sure. But I fully understand that we're very complex.
Absolutely. So I have another question for you about what I have noticed. So I'm so excited to talk to you because I have noticed some things about our community that I'm really happy to talk with somebody that does this full time from a scientific viewpoint. I have noticed that a lot of women that come out later in life often come from chaotic childhoods. They are often chaotic with a capital C or chaotic with a small c, And oftentimes they have come in from where there's a lot of arguing, there was alcoholism. Like I'm an adult, I'm an ACOA, I'm an adult child alcoholic. It'll be something that will be with me for my entire life, but I am an ACOA. And one of the questions of curiosity for me is, but there's lots of people in our community that are also that way too. Like my wife comes from a chaotic home as well. She came out when she was 18. What keeps some people not figuring this out until they're like older? And older, I'm going to say 25 plus because I say that like later in life is self-defined. So my youngest people I've ever worked with have been 25. And then I have people over 70. But what is it? Have you ever thought of like what is it? What makes some people be able to And, at first I always thought, oh, it's because maybe they had a relationship in high school now that has nothing to do with it. People do have relationships with same sex in high school and college and then go on to marry the opposite gender. What?
That's a huge conversation. I would love to have some time, but like to be brief today, I would say that there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around the connection, the direct correlation between childhood trauma and deciding that you are non heterosexual. I'm not saying that there's no connections because there's correlations, and you brought this up around the childhood experiences. And so the Adverse Childhood Experiences Inventory is a study that was done in the late 90s with the CDC and Kaiser Permanente in California. And essentially what that did is it established a way to look at how childhood experiences that were adverse, how those impacted the life, quality of life, the vitality of life, the morbidity of life. How would that really identify later in life? And it was shocking. So the reason I bring that up is because if you look at the disparities that people of the LGBTQ plus community have in adulthood, you can look at adverse childhood experiences, and that might be something like, was there an alcoholic? Did you witness domestic violence? Were you neglected? Did you have enough food to eat? Right? Was there a drug user? Was someone incarcerated in your family? Okay, so those types of dynamics, constructs, and how those impacted you. But if we move further away from that model, we will also look at what is self-reported from childhood trauma versus what people experience it in childhood trauma. And I mean male and female, right? So a lot of people make, I'm going to say, ignorant suggestion that if you are a lesbian, for example, you must have been raped in childhood. I'm sorry about the trigger warning, but you must have been abused in childhood. That is a falsehood.
Yes, it is.
Because most of us, the majority of us anyway, have been and can self-report some incidences
And when you
of
say us,
coercion.
women, right? You're talking about
all women, men, and men as well. Boys rarely self-report. It is very difficult to get the actual statistics on sexual violence in boys. There's a lot of gender-based violence in adulthood. I've done studies and teach on that because it's really important for people to know. What I also understand in the community is because they're coming from places, say, dysfunctional households in young adulthood or in childhood, where that in adulthood, they're tolerating more. They're not understanding. What does a healthy relationship look like? What does that dynamic look like? And so the abuse kind of continues, where we're bringing back into our sphere the constraints, the people, the experiences. They're going to show us where we're stuck, where we need to do work. So I think like foundationally, that's a way to look at it and say, even though a lot of us that have now decided that we're going to live as a queer person have had trauma in childhood, there's not a direct relationship. We can't look at that. We can look at the instances, and I can put it on a graph to you and say, okay, if you are an LGBTQ plus person, your incidences of dysfunction are much higher in childhood. That is a fact. Yes.
Wow,
that is
really.
very true.
So when you put it against, like the whole spectrum, people that are on the LGBTQ spectrum have suffered or have gone through some sort of childhood trauma.
Yes. More their adverse childhood experiences on the scale that we use is higher.
You love each other, but lately it feels like you're speaking different emotional languages. Strengthening Love is a powerful relationship course created just for lesbian couples. You'll learn how to break painful patterns, communicate with compassion, and feel truly seen again together. Created by LGBTQ plus experts, it's affirming, practical, and designed for real-life connection. It's a one-time payment, lifetime access, and real change. Visit healthylesbianrelationships.com to enroll today, because your love deserves more than just getting by. It deserves to grow.
Is higher. And so like we have to look at that. So like I know that, and using that inventory.
Because we're more likely to self-report though? Because like my wife and I have talked about that. Like she has said, I think it's because women talk about these things more than men do. And so that is one of the reasons. And I also think that like the number of women who've experienced sexual violence or sexual abuse as children is right across the board. Except maybe more people in the queer community are more willing to talk about it. Do you think that has anything to do with it?
Well, I think we seek justification for our choices, in a socially normative culture that really looks at like our chosen lifestyle as being either some type of mental illness, some type of psychosis, or some type of criminal behavior, and that stigma has to shift. And until that stigma shifts, we are going to continue to try to justify our life choices. I don't think we should or need to, but we do it.
Okay, so now you
Right.
use the C word. So choice. Do you think it is chosen, or do you like for me, like once I realized I was not straight, I had to make the changes I needed to make. So it was almost like out of my control. It was either I make these choices to live my life a certain way, or I'm going to die. That's literally how I felt.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear your reflection on the C word.
Yeah, sure. And this is a charged subject, and I do get
I
pushback.
know.
I get pushback, but that's okay. I welcome it. But so my
Because it opens up the conversation, right?
absolutely. So
Yeah.
my perspective is that we might choose our behavior. If you look at like the computation of life's purpose, big conversation. If you look at that and we say, what is life's real purpose? Well, it's to know ourselves. It's to find ways that we can evolve consciously. Okay. So when we learn something about ourselves, the gap between what we then learn about ourselves and where we reside is suffering. You had to move past. Now, could you have made a choice to stay in your heterosexual relationship? Yes, because you have choice. You have free will. You have agency over your life. Do you choose to live in a lesbian relationship? That's your choice. Do you choose to change your mind later on? Absolutely. So when people say like, I was born this way, yes, you were born that way, but you still have choices to live how you live. If you come from a place where you are bound by a lack of choice, you're always going to feel trapped. You're always going to feel like you're suffocating in this culture. And I'm saying to be empowered, own your choice. Own the fact that you can still choose. If you wanted today to divorce your wife and marry a man, you so choose, and you can do so because you get that choice. And so like there's power in knowing that you have choice, you have free will, and you're choosing things at risk because then there's being ostracized, there's other challenges, there's legal problems, here we are. But you still have choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how I've always like thought about it, is that I feel like, yes, people are born that way, but I agree with you. We have the choice whether, like I say to especially early people like that are just thinking about this and they're only like 2 or 3 months in, saying the choice is with what you're going to do with it. You don't have to make any changes. If you want to stay in your marriage with your husband and do whatever, you can. That's the choice inherently.
Right.
That is,
Right. Absolutely. And then there's just judgment around that. And so that's why I share with people who seek to work with me, is that if you show up and you say, I just need to be able to be okay in my heterosexual relationship, how can I navigate how the feelings that I'm having while I'm in that process? Like, I've decided I'm going to stay in it, whether it's for your kids or finances or whatever the reason might be. It could be religious based. That's fine. We'll figure it out, and if you say, look, I've got to get out, I just don't know how, we can figure it out. So it's really empowered by the person of where they are in their life and what they want to do. Sometimes you just don't know how to navigate it.
Right. And can I ask you, how many people come to you with one version in their head of what they're gonna, like what their goal is? And how often does it change? Whether it's somebody who's like, I'm coming out, that's it, I'm getting divorced, and then they go to the other way, or vice versa. How often does that happen?
Well, I can't give you a statistic, but I can share that what happens more often than a huge shift in that perspective is this deep understanding of, it doesn't matter where you are, you're okay. That you're going to be okay, that you can have tools to be okay, that you could feel okay, devoid of shame, devoid of embarrassment, just recognize that this is part of your journey. And so like that huge shift in consciousness is what takes place most of the time. I've had a few people who, like, say someone might be going through transition and they are currently in a heterosexual relationship. Hence the partner now, the spouse, has to figure out a way to navigate through these changes. That's not really what they signed up for. How can I stay in this marriage? So I've gone through quite a bit of that. And there are ways to do that, but ultimately the choice has to be that person's, right? Was this going to continue to work, or am I bound by like the legalities of, like this paper that I signed that, till death do you part? Well, yes, but like under these extreme circumstances, is that a life of misery, or can you find a way to work within that for yourself so you feel still empowered to be who you are and you're attracted to someone who's not identified now in your marriage? So it gets complicated, but it's definitely workable.
I have actually witnessed a couple who's gone through that. It's a trans woman with her wife now. And it was challenging. It was very, very challenging for the both of them. I'm curious, what is it like to work with cishet couples or cishet people versus queer people? What's the differences?
Well, one of the differences is breaking down some of what you referred to earlier, which is like the patriarchal, misogynistic, how we do relationship in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So just breaking through, and sometimes people actually come to me as a couple and I say, you're not ready. If you don't work on yourself and you're coming to me to help you work through, something in your marriage, it's like, if you're not willing to see, well, I call it sweeping your side of the street, right? Very common cliche, but if you're not willing to show up to your own stuff, like what are your own constraints? How are you thinking? What are your deeply held beliefs that are creating this like wall of resistance with your partner? Why can you not listen reflectively or actively? Like, let's show up there for each other. Then we can talk about how the two of you can work or not work together. But so that happens a lot where people are like on their last breath, this marriage is going to completely dissipate unless we get some help. But have you each individually worked on yourselves? So like that happens a lot. I think that would be the biggest difference, where there's still a role for a man defined in a relationship and a role for a woman defined in that heterosexual relationship, heteronormative one, where in queer couples, it's all about like, I love the idea of being queer. And that's how I identify myself, is because that could be like 1 degree past what we consider to be like, normal or whatnot. And I think we're almost all there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's enjoy the nuances. Let's appreciate the differences. Let's expand ourselves and be as, I don't know, unapologetically ourselves as we can be. That's I think the joy of life, isn't it?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And also, too, like having been in a very typical straight marriage and now being married to a woman, I am grateful every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have no idea. It's like little things,
Mm-hmm.
like just like I've been like, I'm burning to write a book about straight marriage versus gay marriage, and some, because it's like I've experienced both. I know what
Right.
both are like, and
Yeah.
what has been really interesting for me is actually having a partner. Like my wife is my partner. We both take care of everything. While when I was in my straight marriage, we had very defined roles.
Right.
Of
And we
what
do. Right. And we will.
No, I tried so hard to get him out of that defined role.
Well, it's hard. I'm a huge advocate for men. I've written and published on like elusive masculinity in our culture and how that's like really hard for men. I've raised 2 beautiful men myself, so I was able to like impart that on them and then have a measurable result to see how they turned out. But I think it's really a key point that you made earlier. I agree that women communicate differently. So women tend to talk to each other. There's a lot of nuances in lesbian relationships that you're not going to find a heterosexual relationship. For sure, one of them is communication. Women are built, we touch, we look at each other in the face when we talk. We expect that the other person is going to reciprocate our expression of our feelings and things like that. That is not the case in most heterosexual relationships. And in gay male relationships, when men can get to a place where they can feel safe, the problem with how we rear our boys is that from a very early age, in fact, it's in utero, that we start telling them they're going to be big, tough, domineering, game changers, run the world. And we tell our girls, you're going to be little princesses. You're going to be a great wife someday. You're going to be this. No. So we indoctrinate our boys in a way that they don't know how to show up to a conversation. They can't articulate their feelings because 1, we've told them they shouldn't have them. And 2, we've not given them opportunities to express them. And then when we get to 25, when their brains are fully developed, which is around the age of 25, their executive functioning is intact. And then people are like, oh my gosh, you're like a stone. I can't get you to even communicate with me. But my girlfriends and I have such an intimate relationship. Okay. Hence the draw into that. So we need to revamp how we parent our boys. It's a whole nother conversation. But this is what happens. And there's a huge difference between gay and non-gay relationship.
In the beginning of our I'm very mindful of the time. I know you have a strict stop time. So I have a million things to ask you. But what I want to talk about is the spiritual side of this journey. Um, I it's been very interesting to me to observe that some people come out and they just come out and they go on and live their lives. And then there are the people, and that tends to be the type of people I attract, who are very spiritual. And coming out is like akin to a spiritual awakening, a midlife awakening, a spiritual awakening. How have you found that in your own experience? And because I have like been doing a lot of work now in my Authentically Us group. Like we have a spirituality group called The Thin Place. We do it once a week, or excuse me, twice a month. I'm sorry. And like we're doing Andrea Gibson's poems for next week. And I'm really trying to cultivate the more spiritual aspect of this. Just say some things about the spirituality piece.
Yeah, sure, sure. And I that's actually a passion of mine as well, because I've been on my spiritual journey for, like I said, over 30 years. I'm an avid meditator. I'm a major gypsy. Um,
I'm a wanderer, very wanderer.
yeah,
I'm all over the place.
for me to find solace in who I am, I had to recognize that I cannot be devoid of source. So whatever that source might be in your life, I think it's salient, it's primary, it's essential to you living a joyful life. Now, that is not to say that you have to stay bound by the religion that you were born into necessarily. Do I think that there's a place for faith in a life? Absolutely. So when we look at like spiritual life, I know people say, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Like we can split hairs on whatever language we want to use. But I think what it comes down to is, can I be so still in love with myself? Can I recognize that source, whether that's God to you or Allah or Buddha or whoever it is, will love me unconditionally? Can I love myself? Because if I am a representation of that goodness in life, if that's what I strive for, even if we look at like Christ consciousness, if I'm supposed to like be trying to emulate Christ's behavior, then of course it's like, let me wash the feet of the sinners. Like there is no judgment. I have to then reflect back and say, I accept this level of love, of unconditional love in my life, and I'm going to live from that premise. So spirituality is a key to joyful living. And I would love to do a whole, thing on that as well, because it's like what I find is really heartbreaking to me, because I was raised Catholic and then like I moved away from the Catholic Church, and and I'm still a Christian, but I like very spiritual as well with some of my teachings, beliefs, is that people are so hurt because they feel like God doesn't love them anymore. Like I did something wrong because you were told you were doing something wrong. And, we don't have time, unfortunately, to really reflect and deep dive into that, but it's so critical, because one of the reasons why people don't love themselves, or they're just seeped in shame, is because they think God won't love them anymore.
Yes.
This is false.
Yes.
False.
That
what
is
God. What God would ever think that? That is a God coming through a very patriarchal system to control behavior. Again, a deep conversation for another time, perhaps.
Well, yeah, I always felt like this for years ago, I stopped believing in hell because I couldn't reconcile a loving presence with the idea of internal damnation. I would love to ask you really quickly, when most of the women that I work with, probably about 80%, are coming out from some conservative religious tradition, which has taught them that being gay is sinful and wrong. And it's gotten so bad now. Like my wife was raised Southern Baptist. It wasn't that bad back then, but now it's like being gay is the worst sin of all. Like you're worse than a murderer if you're gay, which is so ridiculous. How do you help people, or how do people help themselves when that's their background, yet they still feel that call to connection?
Yeah.
Because what I've found, people fall into three camps. There are the people that try to reframe it. There are the people that are so pissed off, they're never going to go back towards it again. And then there are people that are struggling to maintain their queerness inside of patriarchal religion that's never going to accept them for who they are. So like, if you're somebody just coming out and you're really just thinking about all this, how do you start the process?
That's a great question. To be brief, I would say I would ask them to examine the fact that, like the other systemic influences, family, school, religion is one, education, now social media, and our social groups. Okay. Those major systemic influencers in life. The fact that they are Southern Baptist or fundamentalist or whatnot is a label. It is not who they are. It's not the essence of who they are. You were born into whatever ethnicity and whatever town. Like, do I say that I was born in New York, I moved to Florida? Does that mean I'm a New Yorker or Floridian? Now I'm a Coloradan? Like it doesn't matter. It's just a label. If I cut you open and look, there's no like label that says, oh my gosh, Southern Baptist. That means that, God will only love you if you come and see me every Sunday, and tithe. Like it's just a label that you were born into. It was a way to identify who you might be in the culture, the community that you were living in at the time. It doesn't have any other value unless you put value on it. So I get people to really examine old tapes that don't make sense, that we're just like bringing with us, because we believe that this is who I am. That's not who you are. It's just a label.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'm going to use that. I really like that. So switching gears, did you have in your process a coming out song?
Oh, well, yeah, well, there's a few, but the one that I like fills me up when I hear it is this song called I Shall Be Released by Grace Potter and the Nocturnals. It's kind of an older song, but she belts it out, but it's just really powerful. So like go to that one.
Grace Potter is very sexy.
Yeah.
I saw her in concert here in Nashville. Oh my gosh, she's a very sexy woman.
Yeah. Great vocals too.
Yeah. Any books or movies that have really changed your perspective on things? Well, you're a scholar, so I'm sure there's been a lot.
Yes. I'd like to say I have read hundreds and hundreds of books, but actually my book that really changed the way that I viewed myself in the world was a book called Living in the Light. It's also an old book because I started my journey so long ago by Shakti Gawain.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an amazing book that it was like, if people like to follow like Eckhart Tolle, look at these other gurus and masters that look at like consciousness from a different perspective and how we're kind of manifesting our lives. That book really hit home for me. It's a really great book, easy to read too.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe your life today? You've been out for a long time. You have lived with a queer identity for a long time. So how would you describe it?
Adjectives: expansive,
Mm-hmm.
definitely academic, curious, super creative. I love being in nature. I love, talking with people, definitely an advocacy. It's just like, I think pretty much like that. Like I'm not done.
Yeah.
Done. I want to do more. I want to help more in the ways whatever gifts I have, I want to bring them to the world. I get a lot of joy working with people one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a different level of how I can put myself into the world in my community through my scholarship. So the books I write and the things that I do adds a different level. So I get really fulfilled. I'm pretty happy.
How can people find you, Samantha?
Well,
Reach out to you.
You can Google me, but like Bay Integrative Wellness is my practice. And if anybody wants to have a conversation for free, a consult, I'd be happy to see if I can either bring you on as my client or direct you. Or Byword Books Publishing is a publishing company that I have, which is just all about my endeavors. All my books are on there, projects I do, mentorship, ADHD coaching, a lot of things that I do academically, but people can look there. I've got a Facebook couple groups. One is called, my name, but then Bay Integrative Wellness is a separate group that they can look there. So you can find me pretty much anywhere.
I understand. So Samantha has written this very helpful guide and workbook called Coming Out in Adulthood. As somebody who's worked with our community now for 7 years, I highly recommend this. This is a good book. It's a good primer starter to get you questioning things and thinking about things, and then finding a professional to work with as you go through this process. Yes. So, Dr. Winterberg, thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you for answering my call to come on the show. I really appreciate it. There's so much more I want to talk to you about, but we are time limited. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for asking me to share and join this conversation. And I'd love to have another one if the opportunity comes up.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ Stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.